Hey guys, today we're going back to another video. In fact, today we're actually going to do a bit of a different video. Today we're going to be reacting to a video called Every Insomniac Spider-Man Character from Weakest to Strongest. Now, if you don't know what Insomniac Spider-Man is, it's basically a game, basically a free story game. It has 3 games so far: Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man Miles Morales, and now Spider-Man 2. Crisis, the person who I'm reacting to, is doing a character tier list from weakest to strongest. Today we're going to be reacting it and to see if I agree with anything. Let's go.
Starting off at the bottom, we're kind of at low-tier supervillain level. While being incredibly skilled and well-armed, I don't see a reasonable way to place Sable much higher.
I think Sable is definitely at least in the C tier, to be honest. Sable's extremely skilled and was able to actually punch Spider-Man, but to be honest, we can all tell Spider-Man's always holding back, so...
Master via his greater combat skill in tandem with a similar, if not greater arsenal, should be able to beat Sable more times than not.
In fact, he would just copy Sable's moves, so I'm not really sure if between Sable and Taskmaster, debatable. I consider that debatable.
With both soldiers lacking any statements or feats of performing on the level of the series superhumans.
That's
with
true,
Fisk
I guess.
being capable of slamming...
Fisk is probably last place of all of the last. He's just pathetic. He's really weak. No, he's kind of like Rhino, but much weaker.
Spider-Man through walls or barreling through metal and concrete. Just given her standard kit of energy pistols and bolas, the best we see her do is contend with a pretty obviously severely holding back Spider-Man.
True.
Hammerhead is pretty clearly at the top of this tier, given his enhanced armor and beam weapons, being described as about as hard as steel by the webhead. However, he was downed by a pretty low-tier explosion.
Pretty low-tier explosion. This explosion is kind of massive, if you ask me. But Hammerhead, I think he should be placed at least much higher. However, there are characters like Rhino, for example, who definitely destroy the hell out of him. He would just ram into him and kill him. No doubt. But Hammerhead should probably be placed a bit higher, maybe in the B tier. Maybe. Around that. Hammerhead has energy weapons, laser weapons, speed of light. It's going to be really hard to evade them, and they can probably cause a lot of damage.
Especially when compared to the feats of those placed higher. So he's safely capped here. Yuri or Wraith from the new game is likely below Sable, per the latter having greater skills and equipment, and Peter clearly going easy on his old ally.
Yuri or Wraith is probably slightly stronger than Fisk in my opinion, but other than that, she's extremely weak. She doesn't have many powerful abilities. Basically, she's probably the weakest boss you can fight. She has lack of abilities. It's very weak in her HP, durability, and yeah, I agree. She should be probably last place.
But if you think she just tanked this explosion and is built differently, she might just be boxing up Hammerhead.
Actually, she did not take the explosion. She was following them, and then the explosion went boom, and then she went up. So she did not actually take the explosion.
Alright, let's talk about the irrelevant guys. Speedball's the worst character in fiction, and...
Confirmed. True. Works character.
Black Cat literally does nothing. Struggles with Craven goons.
True.
Meanwhile, Prowler, other than just sneaking up on Miles a few times, doesn't really do much.
No, Prowler should be in the list. He was able to fight against Miles. Actually, pretty probably in C, B tier. He's pretty strong. Not gonna lie.
Mysterio also technically can't really do anything because him being Mysterio is super circumstantial in the game and wouldn't work in a versus battle setting.
I haven't actually fought Mysterio, so I don't really know.
What is this? Just call this the trash can tier, please. Above said tier, we'd be looking at more so downright enhanced and superhuman being. Adrian Toomes in his earlier...
Vulture. I kind of agree that, yeah, he's probably the weakest of the Sinister Six. However, I think he could beat some specific members. He's quite strong. He could probably also cause some damage to Spider-Man if Spider-Man's not focusing. If he's not focusing, then yeah, Spider-Man's dead. I have to stop pausing.
Encounters with Spider-Man actually managed to nearly deal the web slinger in contrast to Kingpin, who was pretty much bullied by a younger Peter within the pages of the game's prequel novel. Peter even deemed him a good enough test for Miles Morales, as seen in the augmented training modules within his solo game. That being said, the modern day and more adept version of Spidey was able to 1v2 Vulture with no signs of injury in
True.
cutscenes or in the game's lore.
Vulture's
His
just
arsenal
weaker.
of sharp wings and knife-like projectiles also pale in comparison
Yeah.
to the more impressive abilities
Those are really not gonna be much of a threat. Yes, they can probably kill Spider-Man if Spider-Man's being an idiot. However, that's not gonna happen because Spider-Man's not an idiot. Plus, Spider-Man always holds back. I mean, even in the comics, he doesn't hold back. Like, accidentally, when Dr. Octopus took control of Spider-Man, he accidentally ripped or punched Scorpion's jaw off by accidental. So he's not even using full strength.
as shown later on. Such as with the Shocker, who managed to outdo the Vulture with his new and improved suit and Vibroshock gauntlets, blasting
Shocker is very definitely should be probably one in B tier. She is extremely strong. Look at this one punch. Spider-Man doesn't even have eyes anymore. He lost his eyes. That's how deadly this punch.
Spidey through bank vault doors and consistently causing so much collateral damage with his various battles.
That's
Herdman
true.
here also boosts similar lore of pressing an early version of Spider-Man, as well as simply boasting more impressive feats
Done
overall.
talking.
Mr. Negative, however, probably has the best and most varied abilities within this universe.
It should be higher.
Projectiles, mind control, illusion creation, life drain.
I believe Mr. Negative should also be in the B tier. I feel like most of these people you're mentioning should be in the B tier, considering they're just extremely overpowered. I mean, Mr. Negative definitely should. He possesses all these abilities. Yes, he did lose to Spider-Man, who's holding back even more because it's kind of a mentor to him. And not to mention, like, he was enraged. He also lost to Miles, which, yeah.
And on and on. That being said, he too was dealt with pretty easily by Peter, all while the hero attempted to talk down his former acquaintance. Even when fatigued
Oh, I
with
forgot
many
about
broken
this.
bones, Spider-Man still outdid Lee, all while in the Mindscape where Mr. Negative should be at his most powerful.
True.
I could see him being placed higher, of course, if he managed to spiritually ensnare anyone placed above him, but even still, those with strong wills would overcome this anyway.
Like
and
Spider-Man
based on his
and
battles
Miles.
throughout the first game, he still can't manage to beat an injured and holding back Spider-Man. This coupled with the statements of Miles' power being adversely affected by being in proximity to Martin, I wouldn't personally put him at a comparable level with Spider-Man outright, especially considering his lackluster feats all throughout Spider-Man 1. Some people have argued that Mr. Negative grew stronger
False.
in the time between the first and
He
second
only got his strongest was in Spider-Man, well, the first one, because his strength was linked to his rage.
game. However, I find that unlikely considering that in the first game, his strength was stated to be linked to his rage,
True.
with Martin more or less seeking redemption all throughout Spider-Man 2. So, I think it's just the case that his abilities were nerfing Miles.
Ock
Yeah.
is always a weird character to place in relation
Octopus
to
at C tier? I highly doubt this. The devs even said that Dr. Octopus was stronger than Spider-Man in the game in every single way, and Peter needed to get an anti-Ock suit, and even then, he had peptide. So I even think that Oct is even stronger than anti-Ock Peter. So I think that Octopus should be much higher on this list. Big disagree with Dr. Octopus.
Spider-Man, as pretty much all of his iterations boiled down to a crazy old man with pretty strong arms. That being said, he did manage to throttle Spider-Man before their final battle, with Peter resorting to empowering himself with the suit more powerful than his standard advanced suit. And even with that, Otto still gave this version of Peter a hard
I told
time.
you.
Though, of course, there are factors such as Peter's battle damage and great admiration for his mentor holding him back. However, Otto is referred
Still.
to as the game's ultimate villain in
Yeah.
official material,
Don't.
which is in line with his narrative presence as the Sinister Six's leader and the game's last challenge to overcome.
That being said, we are personally partial to putting Scorpion above Ock.
I highly doubt that Scorpion's stronger than Oct. Like, yes, he's got a if he stabs Oct with his tail, it's done for Oct. But Octopus has technicals or strong arms that can react in less than 1 nanosecond. That's literally light speed or something. Really fast. So I don't, and Scorpion's not. Well, that in fast, he cannot do that fast. So yeah, he would definitely lose.
as I think his feats are greater than that of the prior mentioned statement. Scorpion nearly killed both Spider-Men via his poison
Sure,
abilities,
but
and
still.
was able to bypass each of their spider senses to achieve such. In fact, Gargan even says that if it were up to him, he'd just do Spidey in right then and there. However, he's holding back for the sake of Otto's plan and the reward money he'd been offered to keep Peter alive. It's possible to use Ock's statement to maybe suggest Scorpion would never manage to infect him with his poison. However, based on his cunning and speed, I find that unlikely. I'll admit, though, that this is a pretty debatable tier, but you haven't seen anything yet.
Above them,
B
we're
tier.
beginning to get into true heavy hitters and even some foes that eclipse Spider-Man, at least as far as conventional strength. Starting at the bottom, we have Scream, or the
I feel like Scream probably is lower. Now that might be debatable, but first Spider-Man's holding back on MJ. I mean, Love is life. He's gonna be holding back more than her than anyone. So, not to mention she's even trying to break free votes, so it's kind of difficult to rank her. So I don't think she probably should be a C.
symbiote-empowered version
C-tier.
of Mary
C-tier.
Jane. While appearing to be impressive, the reason I don't see her as too strong is based on the context surrounding her fight with Peter. Not only is Peter tired and fatigued, but if Peter was holding back on
I forgot
anybody,
about
it
that.
would be his love interest. And
Yeah.
even in the cutscenes, we don't see him really trying to fight her, but more or less trying to talk her out of it, or rather help her fight the symbiote. And even with all the odds stacked against Spidey, he still ultimately beats Scream.
Nope.
Scream versus Ock is a little tricky, but
Nah,
I think it
Ock
comes
wins.
down to if you think Peter in the second game should be above anti-Ock Peter, which I believe he should be based off the arms and the fact that Peter was only tired against her rather than dealing with multiple broken bones. Peter's holding back on both of them to an
True.
insane degree, but to be honest, Pete's new arms
But
would have a better
still.
feat compared to anything Ock does, taking the multi-city block energy from Miles.
Multi-city block? That's multi-city block? My god. But even then, Dr. Octopus is stronger than Spider-Man, and we know Spider-Man's probably stronger than Scream. Look at Venom. He's probably gonna be like at the top of the list.
So it'd be close, but Scream would
Sure.
subdue him in the end more times than not.
Here I have Rhino, both in his base
True,
form
he should be
as
here.
well as his armored variant seen in Miles.
When it comes to Rhino, he should be in B tier or potentially A tier. Is armored variant at least. He's quite strong. Maybe he could potentially even beat the Lizard, but it's debatable between him and the
Miles
Lizard.
Morales. Peter actually regards Alexei as stronger than himself and was even bested outright in Miles' video game. That being said, Peter did beat Rhino at least one time off screen and managed to deal with him and Scorpion at the same time while injured. He can as well catch and negate Rhino's blows, at least with both hands, and survived a beatdown from him as well as other villains. When looking at all of this holistically, it seems to me that if the two were placed in a unbreakable room with nothing in it, Rhino is just as likely to beat Spider-Man as the other way around.
Yeah, but I think-
However, if given the
But
opportunity
I think Spider-Man probably win more chance than
to
not.
execute his greater cunning, Peter can at least restrain or contain Rhino to secure a victory. There just isn't a way to concretely say that Rhino is beating Spider-Man more times than not, given their record and the wider context therein.
The Tinkerer would therefore be placed above, as she was instrumental in beating Rhino alongside Spider-Man and could blatantly damage his more armored form with her advanced supersuit, and
But I don't think she could potentially beat Rhino. She would probably lose at least the armored variant. I think she could beat the normal variant.
enhanced weapons. Tombstone has a statement of being able to survive a day's worth of Spidey's punches, and due to
A day's worth? Spider-Man's punches, even then.
only defeating him by weakening his skin's durability, he'd have to be at least more durable than Rhino,
That's
as Peter
impressive.
can deal with him way easier than Tombstone, it seems.
Electro, based on my assessment, is more so
I say this, Dr. Octopus is said as the final villain and the strongest. However, against some specifics like Rhino and Electro, they probably beat Doc Ock. Like Electro could just stay back and just electrocute him. Electro, he has potential to be an Avenger level threat if he reaches his true goal.
the candidate for the first game's ultimate villain. Peter himself fears Dylan's abilities the most, viewing him as a potentially Avengers-level threat. And this is before Ock's supplying of a harness managed to bring Electro that much closer to his utmost power. He's as well the bedrock for both the series' speed and power up to a point via his massively hypersonic lightning blast and nearly 4 ton of TNT, or large large building levels of attack potency.
That's true.
Electricity in the real world as well natively possesses deadly properties of its own, such as intense heat and its shifting of electrons to essentially damage beings at a subatomic level.
What? I
Again,
did not
even
know that.
still, Spidey was able to 1v2 Electro and Vulture.
But I think like if Electro gets to his true potential, like fucking No Way Home, he got Iron Man Heart Reactor and he was destroying both Toby and Andrew Garfield. So yeah, this man could be very strong.
Fast and strong enough to dodge and withstand his attacks. Such as with Mr. Negative, I could see Electro faring better against certain characters placed higher, maybe Sandman since he seems weak to electricity,
Sandman,
but
yeah.
overall
He should
I
be up.
still see him
I
as
believe
a
Sandman will probably also be on the top of the tier list.
tier alongside those who'd lose to a battle-damaged Spider-Man.
And finally, starting off in a tier above the rest, Peter Parker Spider-Man at the
Nice.
time of Spider-Man 2. Keep in mind though, this is his base, no symbiote amps, but we are taking his new Iron Spider-esque arms into account.
Yeah, I believe he should be the strongest right now. Like A tier. Out of all the ones you've mentioned so far. These Iron Spider-Mans are said to be as strong, or potentially even surpass Doc Ock's arms. Meaning, yeah, he'd win against this version of Spider-Man would beat his own Doc Ock. He's strong.
Naturally, for managing to beat those characters placed below him, many while he was seriously injured, he would just scale above them. He managed to fight through Scorpion's poison, Mr. Negative's mental powers, and ultimately dealt with or defeated his rogues many times throughout his career. Based on context clues such as Peter's working out in between loading screens, his more advanced suit, and mechanical arms based on Otto Octavius' design, Spider-Man by the time of the second game should be an overall greater combatant compared to his first.
True.
He's the OG after all, so it stands to reason that few characters would manage to eclipse
Some
him.
can so.
However, one of the deadliest threats to Marvel's New York would come in the form of Kraven the
Kraven should be higher. I mean, he can fight symbiote Spider-Man.
Hunter.
I think he should even be higher than Miles.
A top-tier warrior
Which is
empowered
something.
by potentially magical elixirs and formulas, Kraven was shown having studied and put down many of those seen in prior tiers.
True.
Shocker, Vulture, Scorpion, and even Electro. While he
True.
employed preparation to some extent, he clearly overpowers and does his prey in a rather conventional manner. He even describes certain hunts in rather difficult terms, meaning it's likely not the case that Kraven just fought totally one-sided battles. He genuinely wanted to fight a greater opponent who could take him out in an all-out battle. Based on this alone, there really isn't a way to honestly place him any lower. And while his swift defeat over base Peter is debatable, as in one could argue Peter wasn't expecting Kraven to be that strong, I think given his ability to even somewhat clash with the likes of symbiote Spider-Man
And
or
Venom.
Venom, this fight wouldn't have gone much differently even if Parker was totally on guard.
True.
Within this tier, we as well have Agent
forgot
Venom
about Agent
due to his
Venom.
fight with Kraven in the wake of Peter's defeat.
I think Agent Venom seems stronger than. No, Agent Venom's strong. I think he's probably, in my opinion, he'd be tied with Peter. Or at least this version of Peter.
Everything we said
We still have the other symbiote amps of Peter.
about Kraven and apply it to Harry here, and consider the fact that the Hunter had no prior information on the symbiote, making this an even more straightforward fight compared to the hunts Kraven otherwise underwent. Harry's ability to pretty handedly box up Kraven here would put him soundly above base form Peter, who lost and would more times than not lose to said Hunter.
And due to his ability to heavily press symbiote Spider-Man,
I feel like Rhino versus the Lizard would be extremely debatable, but I think Lizard could win.
Right,
think
stronger
Lizard
form
would
of the
win.
wall crawler, the giant super form of Lizard would be placed here. Peter struggled heavily in this bout,
Definitely.
failing to force a needle through Connor's skin even up until the latter parts of the boss fight, resorting to injecting the cure into an unarmored part of his body. Peter was forced to become enraged here, abusing his tendrils, which are consistently stronger than his base physicals, as shown in his fight against Miles, all just to restrain Lizard. While the Beast's screams did go a ways to nerf the symbiote, similarly to Kraven using the bell in his boss fight, the Hunter would logically be doing so far more than a mindless wild animal,
Sure, I guess.
leaning and abusing into Peter's at the time weakness to sound, which informs Connor's greater placement slightly above Kraven. I just think Kraven would think to use Peter's weakness way more than Lizard would.
Moving on to the next tier, we're starting off with Miles Morales
Miles.
Spider-Man by the end of Spider-Man 2. Not
Miles
only
is
would
definitely extremely strong. he's definitely above Peter, at least base form.
He have logically grown stronger since his first game. He also blatantly battles and heavily presses Black Suit Peter.
True.
While many jump the gun and claim that Miles outright defeated Peter, there is some context within this fight.
Yeah, first of all, his electric powers are effective against symbiotes, and he used the weakness. Plus, they're both holding back, and they're not 100%. Peter just fought Kraven.
Later on, as Miles' power grows, we are given a few hints that his Venom Blasts are effective against symbiotes, giving Miles a bit of an advantage here, and Peter also had just come off from his fight with Kraven, while he was exposed to sound combined with Peter's inner turmoil and confliction as shown blatantly within the latter rounds of the fight.
That being said, Miles was clearly heavily fatigued himself even before battling Peter, having expended much of his energy just prior to Kraven or his goons throttling the already weakened Spider-Man. And Miles still overpowered Peter many times throughout their clash.
But so did
There's a
Spider-Man.
lot going against both of them. However, I do think that if we were to take a 100% healthy and bloodlusted symbiote Spider-Man against an equally at peak and enraged Miles, it's very much a toss-up. But if we take the presence of any sound-based weapons or nearby objects out of the equation, I think Peter at the very least outlasts Miles due
His
to his
healing.
robust healing factor, keeping him in the
Healing
game
factor is gonna save him.
long enough to win. It's very contentious, which is why Miles is placed as high as he is, seeing as the symbiote amps Peter soundly above his base form. But I don't think it's fair to call Miles objectively more powerful than Black Suit Peter, at least if both of them were uninjured
Yeah,
or
you don't even insert my calls anymore, man. Calls are very important.
unharmed based on the details just described.
And the strongest hero seen in the Insomniac Marvel Universe so far is Anti-Venom.
Yeah,
Boasting
true,
all the power
true.
of the Black Suit with none of the drawbacks, was Peter shocked by the strength it afforded him? It stands to reason that even without its properties as essentially kryptonite to symbiotes, it would be a step up above Black Suit Peter,
True.
and therefore he would be above Miles. As Peter might even just boast a portion of Miles' power plus his latent symbiote portion left over, and along with every bit of Mr. Negative's power all stacked on top of his own. Sadly, I
Lot of
don't think
power.
we saw Peter really flex his muscles in this form, as the only foe placed before him was his dying best friend in the form of Venom.
Yeah.
So I don't think Anti-Venom necessarily has more raw power than Venom regardless, but it is safe to say that Peter was pulling his punches still, as he held out from purging the symbiote and effectively killing Harry.
That being said, in
Venom.
this version of the Marvel Universe, evil reigns supreme.
I
Venom
believe this. Venom is second strongest, Sandman is the strongest. There's no way maybe Electro could beat Sandman, but still.
in this game was a beast,
Yeah.
slamming Anti-Venom with his back turned, and ultimately Miles as well would have been crushed by a further evolved Venom. Again, if the heroes weren't armed with Venom's exact weaknesses
Prep time.
in the form of sonic weapons
Don't forget
or
prep time.
anti-venom, the world would be prepped for null. And it's not like the Spider-Man did well, even given their advantages on paper. Venom still would have won if not for Harry's inner confliction.
Oh, I forgot
And
about
while
that.
technically being defeated by the combined powers of Peter and Miles, Sandman would be an unbeatable foe to much, if not all, of the tier list otherwise. His sheer size alone, combined with his very specific weakness to water and supercharged electricity, as well as boasting some of the craziest feats in the verse like storm creation and city block spanning sandstorms, I really don't see a way to call anyone but Marco the most powerful Insomniac character, even if others could potentially beat him in a rock, paper, scissors kind of
Electro,
way.
yeah.
I'll put it like this. If Miles wasn't there to give Peter the energy, what would Peter have done? And if Peter wasn't there to channel Miles' lightning, what would Miles have done?
True.
Put Anti-Venom at ground level with a giant Sandman throwing tornadoes at him, shooting lightning blasts, I got my money on Sandman.
Can't bench more than I can, let's just say that.
With all that said, look forward to more Spider-Man power scaling and versus matchups in the future from both of us.
Well, guys, this is the end of this video. I will say this tier list, I agreed with some of it, but I will say stuff like Doc Ock, like the early tiers like C tier and some of the B tiers, I disagreed. Like Kraven, I also disagreed. He should have been higher than even Miles, I believe. But the rest was good. Well, anyway, guys, this is gonna be the end of this video. See ya, guys. Bye.